Oh, there it goes. To my right, I'd like to introduce Representative Alvin C., who's sitting in with us today from Transportation. Thank you for being here, Representative. One of our members is testifying in another room, so we're going to go through a couple of these bills, and hopefully he will join us shortly, Representative McHugh. The first bill, 141, HB 141, relative to dogs on hiking trails in state parks. I'd like to recognize Representative Vale for a motion. Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you like me to speak to my motion?
You're right. The second, do we have a second?
I second.
Kelly? You may speak to your motion, Representative Vale.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I move ITL on the bill relative to dogs hiking on hiking trails in state parks. What we learned in the testimony is that in the state parks, the division already allows dogs off leash and under the control of their handler under their administrative rules. And their ability to tailor their administrative rules is really important. And there are other factors involved. We did hear from also Granite State Independent Living and from New Hampshire Audubon about their opposition. And generally, we did not have support for the bill. So that is the reason for my motion of ITL, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Would the maker of the second wish to speak on his second?
I have nothing to add.
No, thank you. She covered it.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak on House Bill 141? I guess not. So can the clerk call the roll on a motion to ITL?
You. And you're going to be last, right? Okay. Okay. On House Bill 141, motion ITL, Representative C.
Yes.
Representative Gould.
Yes.
Representative Horgan.
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Representative Healy.
Yes.
Representative Wolf. Representative McHugh is. Yep. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Representative Donnelly.
Yes.
Representative Dunn.
Yes.
Representative Vale.
Yes.
Representative Rung.
Yes.
Representative Kelly.
Yes.
Representative Simpson.
Yes.
Representative Baldwin.
Yes.
Representative Darby.
Yes.
Representative Hoyt.
Yes.
Representative Lamontagne.
Yes.
Representative Lovett.
Yes.
Representative Ryan.
Yes.
And Representative Harp.
Yes. Motion passes. ITO on House Bill 141. Thank you. I did mention earlier to some of the people, we'd like to have the briefs on these motions in by Friday at noontime. If you could email them to myself and Chairman Renzullu, who was not able to be with us today, so that we can get them in the House calendar, that would be great. Thank you.
So it's on consent.
Mr. Chair.
We have motion to consent. Any objections? Consent. House Bill 174, relative to the filing of notice of intent to cut timber. I believe I have a motion from Representative Harvey Bolia. Your motion?
Okay, so thank you, Chair. I make a motion OTP for House Bill 174 with the amendment, but so OTP is the first amendment. Yeah.
So we have a motion of OTP on 174. Do I have a second? seconded by Representative McHugh. Do I have a second motion?
I would like to also make a motion to OTP on Amendment 2023-0761H, which everybody should have a copy.
So we have a motion to approve the amendment number 023-071H. Do I have a second on the motion to amend? 0761H.
0761H. Thank you.
We have a motion on the amendment, seconded by Representative McHugh. Would you like to speak to your amendment, Representative?
Yes, just briefly, I emailed all members this amendment. So this comes after a lot of, this most recent amendment comes after a lot of discussion about how best to meet all the needs of the loggers and the DRA commissioner and also town officials. And so consensus seems to be pointing at adding the most recent edition, which would be on line 31. It just simply says, if provided that the assessing officials have not communicated to the owner a reason why conditions for approval have not been met, the owner may commence the cutting operation. And then I added, after submitting a copy of the intent and providing the date of filing to the Commissioner of the Revenue Administration. So it gives an extra layer of protection for the town officials and the timber cutters, and that's the reason for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak to your second, Representative McHugh?
So after some consultation with the other members and Representative Harvey Bolia, I agree with this amendment. It does allow for adequate notification. It simplifies the process if the town fails to respond. And the timber cutters agree to this amendment as well. The electronic notification and the calendar day provision simplifies the process entirely and streamlines and allows the timber cutters to cut when the weather is most appropriate for their cutting without further delay. So support this motion.
Thank you, Representative. Anyone else wishes to speak on the amendment? Hearing none, we'll take a vote on the amendment.
Amendment. Okay, so we're gonna have Representative Harb. I'm sorry, Representative C.
Yes.
Okay, Representative Gould,
Yes.
Representative Horgan.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Healy,
Yes.
Representative Wolf,
Yes.
Representative McHugh. Representative Donnelly,
Yes.
Representative Dunn,
Yes.
Representative Vale,
Yes.
Representative Rung,
Yes.
Representative Kelly,
Yes.
Representative Simpson,
Yes.
Representative Baldwin,
Yes.
Representative Darby,
Yes.
Representative Hoyt,
Yes.
Representative Lamontagne,
Yes.
Representative Lovett,
Yes.
Representative Ryan,
Yes.
and Representative Harb.
Yes.
20-0.
I'll recognize Representative Harvey Bolia for another motion.
Okay. You mean to call the roll? Okay, I see, OTPA. Okay. So make a motion of OTPA for House Bill 174 as amended.
So do I have a second on that?
Second.
Representative McHugh,
Okay.
second. Any discussion on the motion of OTPA? Seeing none, call the roll, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Representative C.
Yes.
Representative Gould.
Yes.
Representative Horgan.
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Representative Healy.
Yes.
Representative Wolf.
Yes.
Representative McHugh.
Yes.
Representative Donnelly.
Yes.
Representative Dunn.
Yes.
Representative Vale.
Yes.
Representative Rung.
Yes.
Representative Kelly.
Yes.
Representative Simpson.
Yes.
Representative Baldwin.
Yes.
Representative Darby.
Yes.
Representative Hoyt,
Yes.
Representative Lamontagne,
Yes.
Representative Lovett,
Yes.
Representative Ryan,
Yes.
and Representative Harp.
Yes, that's 20-0.
20.
OTPA. Any objection to consent? Consent.
Thank you, everyone.
Next bill, HB 205, relative to testing private wells. Do I have a motion from Representative McHugh?
Motion to find this bill inexpedient to legislate.
Do I have a second? Representative Wolf seconds that. Do you wish to speak to your motion, Representative McHugh?
I do. We have two bills on this subject, and I believe we'd like to take up the other bill, House Bill 398, over this bill and find a House Bill 398 as the bill that we prefer to pass with a notification requirement over this bill.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak to your second? Mr. Wolf, Representative Wolf?
No.
Any further discussion on the motion? Representative Darby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 205 and House Bill 398 are substantially different from one another. House Bill 205 includes water testing provisions. House Bill 398 includes a disclosure clause as well. I think that we should act on 205 and not find it inexpedient to legislate, because the water testing provision is critical to the quality of water in New Hampshire.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak on the motion? Representative Rung.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with my colleague from Nashua and want to point out to my colleague from Merrimack that these are very two different bills. 398 only addresses notification. That's it. Where 205 requires water testing for new wells. And the reason that is so critically important is we have very inconsistent analysis throughout the state. As we heard in the public hearing, and I believe it was Mr. Grace from New Hampshire Water Well Associations, that there's inconsistent water tests between municipalities. He wants more standardization. There was an anecdote about a person who was happy, their well passed, but it was only tested for bacteria, where someone in another community might find they have arsenic, lead, chlorine might be measured. So there's very inconsistent standards throughout the state. And this gives very different expectations and assurances to Granite Staters. And I believe they all deserve to have their water tested with the same analysis, the same analytes, so that they can be prepared to install, if necessary, the proper filtration or treatment systems. It's going to be far more expensive, I would expect, and for them to discover after they've been living in the house that they have a contaminant that they could have easily installed a treatment system for during the construction. And it all depends on what that water test is. So I'm very much opposed to killing this bill. I think we need the standardization. It was also supported by Mr. Brandon Kieran from the DES's Drinking Water Division. So I would implore my colleagues on this committee to defeat the ITL so that another motion can be made. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on the motion to ITL?
Representative Ronan, would you consider retaining this bill so that we can work on it and define? Because I agree with actually much of what you said about the inconsistent standards, and I do think we need to work on it actually. And I'd almost prefer to retain it, especially for our specific community. And I wouldn't mind working on it. And I wish that we could actually take up the other bill first for that purpose, but they just came in this numerical order.
Yeah.
Would you want to consider retaining this bill? And so we could fix it.
Representative Rung?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, Representative McHugh, we did work on an amendment. If you remember, the only concerns that were brought up in the public hearing was that PFAS was included in as a testing requirement. So the amendment removes all PFAS. It's only included in the DES notification. In fact, the bill becomes almost a mirror image of House Bill 667, which passed the House and the Senate back in 2020, but it died a COVID death. It couldn't get the final vote before the deadline. So this is already a bill that's been debated and studied in both the House and the Senate a few years ago. I don't think we would be able to improve upon that by retaining it. So perhaps after the amendment is shared, you may realize that it does address all the concerns that were brought up in the public hearing.
Precisely why I was hoping we'd take up the other bill. You and I had spoken about that, I think, in a hallway conversation.
Well, we do have a motion on the floor. So as far as, I mean, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind me just making a remark about 398, I think that's the bill to retain. Yeah.
I think we need to talk about the motion to ITL. So if there's nothing else on ITL, let's call the roll on ITL.
Okay. For the motion of,
Yes, Representative Wolf.
There's a motion going around now, and I know we're in the middle of voting ITL on 205. But Representative McHugh had made a good point. Is it possible to get what we want, or are we stuck because of the order that this was presented to us?
I'm not going to take them, Representative Wolf. I appreciate your question, but I'm not taking them out of order. I think we vote on the ITL. If it doesn't pass, then we'll entertain another motion. It appears to me that Representative McHugh will probably make a motion to retain. If that doesn't pass, then we'll take a motion of to pass. So we're going to stay in this order, Representative Wolf. So we're calling the roll call on ITL of H Bill 205. Chair.
okay, thank you. Representative C,
Yes.
Representative Goulds,
Yes.
Representative Horgan,
Yes.
clerk votes yes. Representative Healy.
Yes.
Representative Wolf,
Yes.
Representative McHugh,
Yes.
Representative Donnelly,
Yes.
Representative Dunn,
Yes.
Representative Vale,
No.
Representative Rung,
No.
Representative Kelly,
No.
Representative Simpson,
No.
Representative Baldwin,
No.
Representative Darby,
No.
Representative Foyt,
No.
Representative Lamontagne,
No.
Representative Lovett,
No.
Representative Ryan,
No.
and Representative Harb.
Yes.
Okay,
And if I
that's
can count, that's 10-10.
10-10.
So the motion fails. So Representative McHugh, did you have a second motion you'd like to make?
I move that we retain House Bill 205.
A motion to retain House Bill 205. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Representative Harvey Bolia. Do you wish to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, for the reason I was stating before, the bill does need a little bit of work. And even with the amendment that I'm actually just still reading, even with this amendment, I still see some language that's far from objective that we actually address in an amendment that was sent out to the chair and the vice chair and the ranking member in 398. So I'd like to retain this bill to work on that language. There's already some mandatory testing on wells, and there's already DES notification for anybody within 500 feet, and there's already widespread notification of PFAS contaminants throughout New Hampshire on the DES website. So I think we should consider retaining this bill, and I urge the committee to support a motion to retain so we can further consider the exact right language of this bill.
Thank you. Does the second wish to speak?
No, thank you. I think Representative McHugh said it.
Representative Darby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would definitely recommend or suggest we vote against retaining this bill. We know that there is no statewide testing of wells, and we know as my colleague from Merrimack pointed out that that DES supports this, the well drillers support this, the realtors support the language that's in this bill, and that the bill that this is based on, as was mentioned, 667 passed on consent in 2020. So I would definitely suggest that this does not require additional clarification in terms of the language, and we can vote against retaining this. Thank you.
Anyone else on the motion to retain? Representative Rung.
Yes, I'm also against the motion to retain, and I want to remind my colleagues that Commissioner Scott, in his letter to us dated January 30th, said HB 205 is very similar to HB 667 that passed the House of Representatives in 2020, but was not considered by the Senate due to COVID disrupting the regular legislative process. Significant work and collaboration between legislators, industry, and public health representatives occurred on HB 667 during multiple legislative work sessions while the bill was considered in the House. The primary difference in HB 205 of 2023 versus HB 667 of 2020 is that PFAS has been added to the list of contaminants that must be tested for in newly constructed wells. If we get to a motion with an amendment, you'll see that all that PFAS has been taken out. In fact, with this amendment, if we consider it, will actually enable 205 to revert back to HB 667. And as Commissioner Scott stated, there was so much work done on that. I don't see how a retain is going to make this better that the amendment already does. So thank you. I'm against the retain motion.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak on the motion to retain for the first time? Representative Vale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also speak against the motion to retain this bill. And I just really think that this is the time to get the standardization out there for people, that the insurances that people in New Hampshire need, that they're preparing and they're supplying themselves with the correct filtration for the contaminants that they're facing, it's not something that can wait. And what concerns me about retention is that there has been quite a bit of work done on this bill. We have much support for the work that was done on House Bill 367. And I think we should go ahead with the agreed upon language that that came from House Bill 667, and we should pass this bill. Thank you.
Anyone new on retention? Representative Donnelly.
I'm receiving this amendment, and it seems to take out arsenic. Is that correct? That we want to take arsenic out of this bill?
I don't have the amendment in front of me. Did you pass it out? No, this one still has.
No, I'm sorry. Line
Point of
35.
order.
We're not speaking on the amendment, but what is the amendment? Can someone tell me the amendment number so we're all looking at the right amendment?
Sure. The amendment is 2023-0734H.
In line 8, it has a strike through with arsenic.
Point of order. We're not speaking about the amendment.
We're not speaking about the amendment,
I'm
and
sorry, thank you.
on your motion to retain, did you want to speak again, Representative McHugh?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the bill takes out PFAS, I mean, don't we want to keep it to get PFAS in there? I mean, that's the fundamental concern, at least for since the last couple of years, since 667, died a COVID death. I mean, PFAS has become more and more of a concern, and I think we want some discussion of PFAS in the bill. I mean, that's the point of retaining it. Like we agree on 90% of this. We may not agree on the exact language to be in statute and what's in statute and what's in rules. But let's get to a point. I mean, this is not an artificial retain so we can send it to interim study or whatever. It's truly an effort. I mean, this is a bipartisan issue, especially for our town in Merrimack. We want to do something about PFAS and get something passed. And we've got amendment options on 398, and the numerical order has put us in this situation, if you will. So I was a little surprised when you, Representative Rung, when you first mentioned that PFAS came out, because I think that's kind of the central issue here is some standard or some testing or some notification or some combination of both on PFAS. So why pass a bill without PFAS in it? Maybe it's a bit of a rhetorical question, but that's my issue. Is like
Thank you, Representative. I'm going to recognize Representative Lamontagne, then Representative Kelly.
Yes, I had similar concerns about that, but one of the objections about including the PFAS compounds in the standardized testing is that many people felt, well, it's not a problem everywhere in the state, though it might be. But that's why we want to include the really strong notifications about PFAS in the transactions so that we don't require everyone to do the much more expensive testing for PFAS. But if they see this warning, then they can say, oh, maybe I should get it. It's not mandating it. But we wanted to keep the really strong language about PFAS in the notification. And then another thing is that the PFAS testing is a little bit fluid. There's some new problems with the testing. There might be some contaminants in treatment systems. Representative Rung could speak more in detail about that, but this bill establishes standards for well testing without requiring PFAS across the board, though it could be added later as we learn more about it. But this bill keeps the strong language about PFAS in the notification. That if you mentioned that it might be, they could go to the DES website and see information about PFAS, but most buyers aren't going to do that if they're going to get the notification with their real estate documents. That's where we need to have an impact. So that's
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to add that the bones of this bill date back to 2019 study commission. This is what we got. I think that it's important to pass this. It's been 4 years already to pass this now, get this in statute, and then worry about improving the bill with PFAS with a separate bill. Nothing's stopping us from doing that with a separate bill next year. I think also the EPA is about to release their recommendations around PFAS, and it's important to wait for that step, but we shouldn't hold up the rest of the radon and lead and arsenic and all that stuff from that part. So let's get this done and pass this now.
So I'm going to recognize myself for a comment. I don't think we're all in agreement with the language of 205, whether it's amended or not amended. So I would be voting in favor of retaining. And knowing how we're likely to pass whatever we're going to do on 398, that's another reason corollary to support retaining 205. So if no one else has a question, I'd like to, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just run it real quickly, go back to Representative McHugh. I do think that PFAS has been very important and come to our attention, especially in the last few years. But I know in other communities in the state, these the other things that will be tested for that are on this list have been of concern across the state and other places. So I think when stakeholders came together in the study commission, they really were also interested in having standards across the state for the other issues that are in there. Thanks.
I'm going to ask for a call of the question on the motion to retain. So can I ask the clerk to call the roll?
On House Bill 205, motion to retain, Representative C.
Yes.
Representative Gould.
Yes.
Representative Horgan.
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Representative Healy.
Yes.
Representative Wolf.
Yes.
Representative McHugh.
Yes.
Representative Donnelly.
Yes.
Representative Dunn.
Yes.
Representative Vale.
No.
Representative Rung.
No.
Representative Kelly.
No.
Representative Simpson.
No.
Representative Baldwin.
No.
Representative Darby.
No.
Representative Hoyt.
No.
Representative Lamontagne.
No.
Representative Lovett.
No.
Representative Ryan.
No.
And Representative Harp.
Yes. So I think we have another tie, 10-10.
10-10.
That leaves us one motion, a motion to ought to pass. Who would like to make that motion?
I'd like to make.
I
a
move
motion.
ought to pass.
I'll second.
Ought to pass, moved by Representative Rung, Representative Darby second. Representative Rung, you wish to speak to your motion of ought to pass?
Thank you very much,
I'd
Representative.
like to make a motion about an amendment motion.
Oh, yeah.
Wish to
Um,
make a second motion?
yes.
I'd like to make a second motion to amend House Bill 205 with Amendment 2023-0734H.
And I'll second that.
Representative Darby moves to amend and by the amendment 2023-0734H. Representative Darby, you wish to speak on your amendment motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So first, I'd like to start by talking about the origins, or about the differences between this amendment and the original House Bill 205. The original House Bill 205 had two additional statements in it. One was it had PFAS testing and a section on PFAS testing, and it had it had PFAS testing. We heard a lot of concerns about PFAS testing, both in terms of cost and in terms of the locations and the whether or not the PFAS testing was needed statewide. The other change between this amendment and the original 205 is that, as my colleague pointed out, this strikes out the explicit arsenic clause from the notification language. It turns out that arsenic clause was also stricken in the bill that this was based on, which is, as we've been talking about, 667 from 2020. The reason that specific clause is stricken is because there's a much more comprehensive statement about water quality as a preface to the notifications. It's called contaminants. It starts on line 14 on page 2. It indicates contaminants common in well water. What we heard is that different areas of the state are impacted by different largely naturally occurring contaminants, whether they're radon, uranium, arsenic, and DES has very very extensive information on their website, which is called out on here, about the New Hampshire well water test for home buyers and how to even check your results. If you go down, I've spent a lot of time on the New Hampshire DES website. If you go down that, you'll see that the page that they refer to talks about all of the contaminants that are listed on in section 4 of this bill. However, it does not call out PFAS. PFAS is not a naturally occurring contaminant, and that's why we had to add an explicit section into the notification portion of this document, of this amendment, for PFAS, to make sure to ensure, as has been spoken to, that home buyers are aware that PFAS may infect their well water. The reason some people have asked, you may have received an email about why radon and lead is left, but we've stricken arsenic. It's because if you read the radon notification, it calls out radon in the air as the first, as an explicit sort of source of radon exposure. It's also in water. It mentions it in water, but the first case it covers is in air. Similarly with lead, lead is first described about as being a concern with respect to lead paint. It's also in the water. It can also be in water, but lead paint. And so we have to leave the lead because of lead paint. We have to leave the radon because of radon in the air. The contaminants in common in well water cover the arsenic. And so the language that's in here has been verbally approved by DES. It's been verbally approved by the realtors, and we also heard in testimony that the well drillers supported 667 and 205 without the PFAS testing requirement. So this bill basically is agreed upon by the vast majority of the constituents that are impacted by it, the businesses that are impacted by it, and organizations. And I urge you to vote yes on this amendment. Thank you.
Representative Kelly.
Yeah, I would just like to point out again that this mirrors the exact language from House Bill 667, which passed ED&A unanimously in 2019. Was the outcome of 4 work sessions, and the 2 key differences between this bill and that one are, first, that the PFAS notification, which is rather soft language, and second is the line 14 on page 2. The notification, it says harmful contaminants have been found in private wells throughout New Hampshire. That language is softened from the original bill, which was something that was pointed out by the Realtors Association, that the language originally said most private wells, and that language has been slightly softened to deal with their concerns. So I would again urge all members to vote for this and pass this just like we did in 2019, and then move this bill forward.
Thank you. I'm going to speak against the motion to amend. I'm very against the striking of the notification of arsenic. In my part of the state, arsenic levels have been rising, and I think it's important that the buyer be made specifically aware, as he does, about lead paint and radon, of the arsenic. And although it's not before us immediately, I think to combine this amendment with amendments that are related to House Bill 398, I'm against. I think it needs work. That's why I supported the retention. So I'm going to vote against the motion to amend. Anyone else wish to speak? Representative Ron.
Yes, I just want to clarify a comment that Representative Darby made, that arsenic was removed because it's redundant with language that is captured under the well water testing information that's provided through DES. So the only things, radon, lead, and PFAS, that are added to that paragraph, following that paragraph, are just items that aren't discussed in that well water. So we could go on about mentioning a lot of things besides arsenic. Could be chloride, could be sodium, could be E. coli, but the notification is just the first paragraph, which captures arsenic and other things, and then 3 other things that aren't delineated in that well water testing information provided by DES. To get to Representative McHugh's issue before about why PFAS was taken out, in the original bill, it's specifying 4 specific PFAS, which are currently under regulation by NHDES. They have maximum contaminant levels, but we know in Merrimack that Saint-Gobain has been using Gen X. And that is something that perhaps by the fall, when we get more guidance from EPA, when analytical methodology can be more specific to each PFAS that's used, if this goes into statute, it would be more expedient and more accurate to amend it to keep current with the current situation of PFAS. But right now, even as this bill is not amended, does not account for Gen X. And so I'm wholly in support of the amendment. I think Granite Staters deserve to have consistent well water testing. I think it's a shame that depending on where you live is going to determine the quality of water that's tested coming from your well. So I hope everyone can, consider voting in support of the amendment. Thank you.
On the amendment, anyone else? Representative Wolf.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I can ask, so you would prefer to see this bill without the arsenic, with the arsenic notification in there, even though the bill says that arsenic has to be tested in line 15. So there's not a specific notification on arsenic, but it's in line 15 on the things that have to be tested for. So would we not be improving the situation by passing that, even though you don't have that extra layer of notification?
Representative Wolf, my answer to that would be no. So I think you need to have the arsenic because Representative Darby's mixed 2 bills basically together. The I'm looking at the amendment that was put forth, and it talks about the notification of contaminants in wells under 477-4A. So that deletes arsenic. So that's not about testing. It's part of this bill as amended, or the amendment is when you sell your house, you give notifications to the buyers. He's taken the arsenic out. So that's why I'm not in favor of the amendment. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I ask a clarifying question that might help? So, and I haven't been thoroughly exploring the DES website. So if I were to go to the DES website and look up New Hampshire well water test for home buyers, would it say something on the website already explicitly about everything that would be tested for? Does anyone? Yeah. Thanks.
I don't know if we have any experts in the field to answer that. We do. But I just point out that the amendment, section 1, is about well testing with new well constructions, not about the sale of your house. That's the second part of the amendment.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Ted Deers. I'm the Assistant Director of the Water Division at the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. DES has come out in favor of these bills with various different suggestions, and I think that the amendment that Representative Darby has put forth largely consolidates the language of 398 and 205 into one particular bill. Indeed, if you go to, and I would just, I'll answer it directly, your question directly, and then I will just expand one bit on that in terms of how DES will react to this particular bill being passed. So the answer is absolutely yes. If you go to the New Hampshire Well Test and if you go to the to Be Well Informed parts of our website, you will find really good information written for homeowners about the constituents that are listed in the amendment from lines first page lines 15 through 29. Each of those, and to take Representative Harb's comment directly, because it's something I'm sensitive to as well, is that in your particular area of the state, arsenic is a problem. I happen to be putting a well in somewhere where radon is most likely a problem. I just talked with somebody for whom hardness is a problem in their neighborhood. And I have also talked recently with some folks who have had really bad problems with manganese in their particular neighborhood. And this is the complicating factor in all of this, is that it gets confusing for everyone to understand the differences between those various analytes. That's why I think that this the conversation that occurred both in 667, the conversation around 398, and the conversation around 205 gravitated back to this idea of let's have a common frame of reference, and that's this Be Well Informed area. What will DES do with this if this bill is passed? I can tell you that one of the things that we will do is that we're going to do a lot of work within our website, and also the outreach that we do through our well drillers and through the well drilling board, through the water well board, to do outreach on this to ensure that the messaging that goes out about how people get to this website, how they understand the information that's in there, how they actually can get those resources from other sources as well, from their own well drillers, will be consistent. It will be consistent with the language that's in this bill. It'll be consistently labeled. It'll be easier to find, and it'll be elevated within our website to make sure that as people come into this situation, that they can understand what's going on when they get a relatively, I think for most humans, a relatively complicated set of test results. It's going to be very important for them to do that. So I just want to note that those are kind of how we will react in order to make sure that I think Representative Harb's concern is addressed, that people clearly understand what arsenic or chloride or manganese or radon means for them in their particular domicile.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Deers? Representative Harvey Bolia.
Thank you. Mr. Deers, I had a conversation with somebody from Rules, and I noticed on this amendment that there's an awful lot of specific information about directing people to a website, a specific web page, etc. My concern with this is that a lot of this verbiage in here really should say, New Hampshire DES should be setting the language as far as the form, because in 10 years, you may have redone your website. There could be there's going to be changes in this whole section over time. So that's one of my concerns with this, is that a lot of this stuff should be sort of hashed out in rules, all the details, and directing people here and there, and telling people how to access things. Thank you. I just wondered if you had any comment on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative. I think it's a great question. This is a common back and forth ebb and flow that occurs, I think, here in this committee, as well as others, related to the role of statute versus rule. Clearly, when we have something in rule, or something in statute, it means that's what we're going to do very clearly. Within rule, there's abilities to waive, there's abilities to do other things. But like you said, there's some more flexibility. The way we have dealt with this in the past, because this has occurred in the past, we've had websites for, nigh on 30 years here, that there's often ways that we can redirect. There can be redirects, especially if it's in statute. We can create redirects in that. That's a technology issue that's relatively straightforward to address. And frankly, my guess is that over the next 10 years or whatever, most likely this issue will come back to you all. And I think you already heard from Representative Rung that as the world of PFAS becomes more comprehensive and understood, that there may be additional analytes that might be added to this at some point in the future. So I think that this is something that's going to be addressed by this committee over time. And we would certainly work with the committee to make sure that however we do this, whether it's in rule or statute, and I would just say, sitting here today, we're agnostic, but that we would, we'll make it work however you all want to make it work.
Representative McHugh, question for Mr. Deers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Deers, for taking my question. How does the department plan to enforce this, since I see there's a violation, and how do you define the unhealthy levels referred to in line 23?
So make sure I have the right number. 23. 23. I'm not sure I'm looking.
I think he's
I see
talking
it.
about the
Okay.
amendment.
So yeah, no, this is really a good question. In terms of things that go into, and I'm sorry, it's hard to see you around the speaker here. Thank you for the question. And in terms of what would actually DES would enforce, DES won't enforce provisions in a real estate contract. That is not something that DES has the ability to enforce. So we don't have that kind of ability. That's something that happens between realtor, client, closing, mortgage, all of the different, mechanisms by which people buy and sell property in the state. So that is not something that DES enforces as part of real estate documentation. We don't have ability to do that. In terms of the testing, we have a water well board. The water well board would regulate what well drillers are doing, and it would be largely based on, when people would bring a complaint that they didn't get, notified or something like that. And that would go back to the water well board. There's a way to deal with all of that. In terms of the actual language on 23, this is part of the whole setting of MCLs. This is the whole part of, setting of AGQSs. It's this ongoing conversation, I think, as Representative Rung described, about what levels are going to be harmful. And that's going to change. We know that that's going to change as new science happens, as more compounds are studied, as the industry stays, a step ahead of all of this, trying to make safer compounds and creating new ones that we don't know much about. So this is all going to, be changing over time, which is why that language, I think, is relatively, I think it's okay language in that it does point to you can have unhealthy levels, and those will be defined differently over time. So does that get at the question that you had? I'm sorry if I danced around that too much.
Follow-up?
Thank you for the follow-up. No, not at all. So if I understand it correctly, it's a moving target, I think I heard you say, or it's going to change and it's going to be different over time, those unhealthy levels. So you'll have to adjust what those unhealthy levels are referred to in line 23. And testing the wells, you have a way to enforce testing the wells, but with all this additional testing, sounds like we need a fiscal analysis, and in this budget year, we need to appropriate some funds to help you monitor and enforce all this additional testing. I don't see a fiscal note attached to either the original bill or the amendment. So should we ask for a fiscal note, or can you guys perform a fiscal analysis for us?
Well, I can
on the
tell
bill
you.
or the amendment?
Thank you for asking the question. I don't know that a fiscal note is necessary because this data does not come to DES. This is data that goes to the buyer from the seller or however that's working in the real estate transaction. We don't get this data. We will not be enforcing on this data. So to the extent that someone has a problem, they will be able to identify that and then work that out through the transaction to be able to assure that their water is going to be okay. So there really is not a role except within responding to complaints, which is something that we already do. So I'm not sure that there's a need for an additional fiscal note. There's mechanisms to deal with all of those things already. And if there were a fiscal note, we would be looking at whether or not there are going to be more complaints and how that would cost, but it's going to come out to be indeterminable because we have no idea. So I respectfully, I'm not sure that that would necessarily change the financial picture.
Anyone new? A question for Mr. Deers? No. Okay. Mr. Deers, thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all for your hard work here.
Mr. Representative Darby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to make sure that we're on the same page about how this bill relates to the original bill, House Bill 205. Both bills had two sections. The first section in both bills covered well testing. The second section, that's number 2, that starts on line 6 of page 2, had notification requires. You'll notice that these refer to very different RSAs. That's because one has to do with testing of new wells. That's the entire first section, testing of new wells only. The second section, which are existing tests, affordable tests that can be done by by the state laboratory and a number of commercial laboratories across the state. The second section talks about a notification required. As people might recall, the realtors, following the original hearing on this, sent out what the notifications look like. These are included in the profits P&S statement, and there's a list of the notifications. This is basically going to replace the notifications that are in the existing P&Ss that they send out today. That's why this doesn't have a fiscal note with respect to Section 2.
Representative Darby, are you speaking only about your amendment?
Yes, absolutely. Only about my amendment. I'm talking about Section 2, line 6 of the amendment on page 2. This is only with respect to the notification section in the P&S of real estate transactions. There is no testing requirement or any costs associated with that. Thank you.
I'm going to make a comment, then I'm going to call this question. I heard Mr. Deers mention that Be Well Informed had all of these things on the webpage and notifications already. So if I really followed that line of thinking, we don't need any new statutes. Just tell people go look at the webpage. Secondly, I am concerned about the part 2 beginning on line 6 again, because that relates to the same bill that is 398. I have been advised that there may be a motion on 398 to retain, so I don't know why we're not retaining this bill either. And again, I would vote against the amendment, but I appreciate it being brought forth. So I'm going to ask the clerk to call on the amendment. This is a motion to amend. You're either in favor or against. Can you call the roll, Madam Clerk?
On the amendment for 205, Representative C.
No.
Representative Golds.
No.
Representative Horgan.
No.
Clerk votes no. Representative Healy.
No.
Representative Wolf.
No.
Representative McHugh.
No.
Representative Donnelly.
No.
Representative Dunn.
No.
Representative Vale.
Yes.
Representative Rung.
Yes.
Representative Kelly.
Yes.
Representative Simpson.
Yes.
Representative Baldwin.
Yes.
Representative Darby.
Yes.
Representative Hoyt.
Yes.
Representative Lamontagne.
Yes.
Representative Lovett.
Yes.
Representative Ryan.
Yes.
And Representative Harb.
No.
Okay.
So we got another 10-10. So now we go back to the simple motion of ought to pass made by Representative Rung, seconded by Representative Darby. I believe we have to take a vote on that. Would you like to discuss your motion simply to pass? Ought to pass.
As I said before, I am disappointed the amendment failed. It doesn't preclude a floor amendment to coming in. What's critically important is to give Granite Staters consistent water testing when they are getting a new well. We cannot tolerate having one town test for bacteria and another one testing for arsenic and lead. I mean, everyone deserves to have the same analytes tested when they're constructing a new well. That is the heart of 205. That's what we need to get through. Even if there's analysis for PFAS, it's not going to take away the ability for someone drilling a new well to get information on the quality of that water that could impact their health. It could also influence things that they do in their home, treatment systems they decide to install. So I do urge my colleagues to vote ought to pass on this, and let's do something good for the people of the state. Thank you.
Representative Donnelly.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. I think we all agree that this is very important. I think that there's a lot of challenging and complexity in this bill that needs rewording. So I'm hoping that we can come together to understand how we can really pull this together in, Bill 398. I keep looking at this and go, the complexity doesn't need to be as bad, and for the constituents, for the people drilling wells, for the people buying houses, for them to have all this complexity to continue to try to sort through makes it difficult for them to understand what they need to do. And yes, I do agree that we should have consistency and what the wells should be tested, absolutely should be agree. But let's do what's right for our constituents and really help make this clear. And I'm in technology, as far as I know, websites will change. We may not have websites in 10 years from now. Who knows what we're going to have? Trying to build in technology into any bill, bad to do, because technology will always change. So I would love for us to really work to make this simple for our constituents, make it simple for the well drillers, make it simple for DES. Let's look at simplifying and helping people instead of complexity. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative McHugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be voting no against this ought to pass, but Representative Rung, I wouldn't preclude the possibility of a floor amendment, and I hope we can actually get 398 passed so we at least get half a loaf for the notification. But there were some issues with the amendment. Unfortunately, this still made it imperfect, so I couldn't support the amendment. I hope we can sit down between now and the time this comes to the floor and consider we can make a better amendment. I agree with Representative Donnelly that we should do something to make it simpler, correct some of this language. I mean, I still think there's a path forward. I thought retention was the right way to go, to give us the time. You mentioned that there were some things happening in the fall, so the timing might have been actually right for retention. But anyhow, it's conceivable we can still get there. I think 398 may get us part of the way there. Unfortunately, the way this bill is written in its original form and the way the amendment was, I think we should probably keep arsenic in there. That was one of the reasons I couldn't support that amendment. I've seen arsenic in my own water, actually. Anyhow, so I can't support it as it is. Couldn't support that particular amendment, but I think we could probably get there. I think we're pretty in agreement. I'd like to hear what some of the other representatives from Merrimack, the one on this committee, and the other members from Merrimack who actually aren't in this particular room.
Thank you. Anybody new? Yes, Representative Lamontagne.
I would like to see this bill passed. I mean, there's a lot of talk about passing 398, but that has no testing component. It's just the notification. So if someone gets a notification, have your water tested, once again, they're going to have it tested and there are no standards. They say, oh, I might have arsenic, I might have something, I'm going to have my water tested. But 205 is the only thing that's going to guarantee that every new well is testing for arsenic, among other things. I also have arsenic in my well, and I'm really grateful that it was tested for that. But I'm lucky I live in Dover, where they have higher standards. So we're trying to pass something to make sure every new well is tested. The notification in 398 is not going to do that. And I think we need to take action on it. I don't find this bill overly complicated to understand. So that's all I'm going to say.
Representative Rung.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It appears that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that the opposition to the amendment was on the removal of the language of ours from about arsenic from the notification. Would you be willing, Mr. Chair, to consider recessing the executive session so that an amendment could be made? We still have the opt-to-pass motion open, so if we can bring another amendment where we put that arsenic language back in, if we don't have time to exec it now, perhaps we can do it after the public hearing this afternoon. But I think it is within your power that you can recess the executive session until amendment can, because I can, or I'm, you know, Representative Darby, we can make it to OLS to get a new amendment.
I appreciate your question, but I'm not going to postpone this. I think if you can work with Representative McHugh before it hits the floor, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on this. And I thought that's why we were perhaps going to have a work session that was canceled. Then we tried to put forward by Representative McHugh a retention so we'd have time to work on it. And then all the people involved and other people could be brought back in. So I'm not going to hold off a vote on this. I'm sorry.
Okay,
So I'm going to call
that's
it.
okay.
But you still have time, as Representative McHugh said, to try to work something out before it hits the floor. I'll take one more question because I don't think this is going anywhere. Representative Darby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be brief. I know I've spoken a lot. I just want to stress a point that Representative LaMontagne said, which with respect to new wells. Oftentimes, new wells are replacement wells and they go into a different part of the aquifer. And while you may have had your well tested when it was a dug well, now that it's an artesian well, you have completely different contaminants. This, the testing portion would cover that. Well, the other portion that I wanted to say is that the bones of this bill was based on the Seacoast Commission on Long-Term Goals and Requirements for Drinking Water, which was a bipartisan commission with our own, one of the members is on this committee from Bedford. And so I think that there was bipartisan consensus, and I would urge OTP on 205. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the question be called and let the clerk call the roll call. It is with no motion, with no amendments to pass, ought to pass as written. Could you call the roll, Madam Clerk?
On House Bill 205, Representative C.
No.
Representative Gould.
No.
Representative Horgan.
No.
Clerk votes no. Representative Healy.
No.
Representative Wolf.
No.
Representative McHugh.
No.
Representative Donnelly.
No.
Representative Dunn.
No.
Representative Vale.
Yes.
Representative Rung.
Yes.
Representative Kelly.
Yes.
Representative Simpson.
Yes.
Representative Baldwin.
Yes.
Representative Darby.
Yes.
Representative Hoyt.
Yes.
Representative LaMontagne.
Yes.
Representative Lovett.
Yes.
Representative Ryan.
Yes.
And Representative Harb.
No.
It's 10-10.
So we've gone through the gamut of all of the motions and they've all come out 10-10. So my understanding, it will go to the floor with no recommendation. I believe I'll ask Representative McHugh, who made the motion ITL, to write a memo on that. And Representative Rung, you made the motion ought to pass. So can you write the memo on that? As I mentioned, memos should be submitted to myself and the chair, who regrettably couldn't be here today, by noontime Friday. And I'd like to take just about a 1-minute break before we go into our last bill, 398.
So what?
Julia.
Yeah, it's a house.
No, I know what this is. I'm just showing you this.
Yeah.
We'll put it in later.
Yeah, we'll get something. Get some- I think most of that stuff though, like I was saying, like, all of that stuff should be in bold.
So
It's just,
so you remember I asked you.
yeah, okay. Well, amendments, yeah. But I
That's
think,
why the notification instead gives the background.
Can I ask the members to take their seats? I think we're all back. I call the meeting back to order. Thank you for your patience. We're on House Bill 398. I understand Representative Rung has a motion to make on 398.
Actually, Representative Darby does.
Representative Darby.
I'd like to make a motion to retain House Bill 398.
We have a motion to retain made by Representative Darby. Do we
And
have
I'll
a second?
I'll second it. Thank
We
you.
have a second by Representative Rung. Would you wish to speak to your motion, Mr. Darby?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We just heard that the language in the notification language requires some rework. In addition, during the original testimony, there was concern about the disclosure language that's in House Bill 398. I think it's best to retain this so that we can work on this language together. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak on the motion to retain 398? Representative McHugh and then Representative Vale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would have to agree there is some work that we could do to rework the notification language. It's important that we get it right so consumers and residents of New Hampshire are completely well informed on where to get the test, how to get the test, what levels to look for, and all the resources available to them, and to get the input from DES on these different standards. So we have a little bit of time to do that. So I would definitely support the motion to retain. I'd ask that my fellow committee members to do the same.
Thank you, Representative Vale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I echo exactly what Representative McHugh said. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Any other comments on the motion to retain? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Okay, thank you very much. Representative C,
Yes.
Representative Gould,
Yes.
Representative Horgan,
Yes.
clerk votes yes. Representative Feely,
Yes.
Representative Wolf,
Yes.
Representative McHugh,
Yes.
Representative Donnelly,
Yes.
Representative Dunn,
Yes.
Representative Vale,
Yes.
Representative Rung,
Yes.
Representative Kelly,
Yes.
Representative Simpson,
Yes.
Representative Baldwin,
Yes.
Representative Darby,
Yes.
Representative Hoyt,
Yes.
Representative Lamontagne,
Yes.
Representative Lovett,
Yes.
Representative Ryan,
Yes.
and Representative Harp.
Yes.
That's 20 to
So
0.
we'll retain 398 and be aware, I understand some of our members will be working on a floor amendment for 205. So watch your emails for that before we actually see it on the floor. I'm sure both the Republicans and the Democrats will probably have a caucus on the floor amendment if they can get it out quick enough. I'm going to adjourn this portion of today's hearing. We will reconvene in about 20 minutes at Reps Hall for the speed bill on Lake Winnipesaukee. And I thank you all that came and your patience. Thank you.
Now,
Can I ask all those to please take a seat? Members of the committee, please take your seat. Your name tags are near your seat. Going to call the hearing on HB 448 relative to Lake Winnipesaukee speed limits to order. Thank you all for being here. Would you all please rise and join with me in a pledge to Old Glory? Thank you. You may be seated. My name is Bob Harb. I am the acting chair of Resources, Recreation, and Development today. Let me introduce a few things in the call to order. I am going to ask that people limit their speeches and their presentations to 2 minutes. We have quite a few of you to speak, so if you could hold your presentations to 2 minutes. We have passed out any written testimony that was submitted. If you have other testimony when you approach the mic, let us know. I will announce who's speaking next and who's on deck. It does not matter which microphone you go to. To my left and my right, in the center aisles there, you're going to see a microphone. So you can approach the microphone, give your name, your address, tell us whether you're for or against the bill, and then proceed to give your testimony. If you are asked and you take any questions, please remain at the microphone until you're answered all the questions, if you take questions and wish to. I'd also like to announce that at the end of today's hearing, we're going to be immediately execing this bill. And I'll repeat that again for those present. At the end of the hearing and testimony, we will then proceed to execing voting on the bill. We're going to do that today. So there won't be a second session. We're going to do it all this afternoon. I appreciate your understanding on that. So in our usual protocol, for those of you visiting us and in the house, welcome to the house. We always say that. Welcome to the house. This is our first time Resources being in the house to conduct a hearing, so it's quite an event for us. I'm going to call forward the sponsor of the bill, Representative Bordes. Of course, he's supporting the bill, so he's going to speak in favor of the bill. He's the prime sponsor. Representative Bordes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I stand before you to introduce House Bill 448 relative to speed limit on Lake Winnipesaukee. Last year, I came before the Transportation Committee to introduce a similar bill with the intent of removing the speed limit on the entire lake. After conducting some research and speaking to several people, it was determined that we come up with a compromise bill in regard to the speed limit on Lake Winnipesaukee. This bill would simply increase the speed limit from 45 miles an hour to 65 miles an hour in an area known as the Broads. The Broads is the biggest wide open body of water on Lake Winnipesaukee. You're going to hear some arguing that people, a kayak there, it's a safety issue. Number one, as far as kayaking in the Broads go, during the weekday, in my personal opinion, I believe it's fine, safe, okay. During the weekends, when that lake is twisting and turning and very rough, I personally would be scared to get out there on a kayak or a canoe or any other vessel like that. You're going to hear an argument about shoreline erosion. Now, a simple fact, and I didn't bring it this time, I had a 30-page printout at the last hearing showing that the faster a vessel goes, the less wake it throws. Now, a wake boat that's traveling at 15, 20 miles an hour is going to throw a big, wide wake. With a high-performance boat, or some people like to call it a cigarette boat, as soon as that boat gets up on plane, the wake dissipates and there's barely any wake behind the vessel. This argument's been going on for years in regards to that, and it is a scientific fact that the faster a motorboat goes, the less wake it will throw. This bill, in my view, I have people on my side of this bill that are angry with me, and obviously the other side's angry. I felt we should come up with a compromise that would benefit everyone. Our biggest revenue stream in the Lakes region, in my view, is Lake Winnipesaukee and the Lakes region as a whole. I could go across to Lake Winnisquam and I can race a boat around at 120 miles an hour, no issues. There's no speed limit. There's no regulations with speed limit. In New Hampshire, we have what's called the 150-foot rule. What that means is any vessel needs to be 150 feet away from another vessel. We're one of the few states that does have this rule. I feel we should be enforcing that rule rather than a speed ordinance or a speed limit on the lake. The area known as the Broads is just wide open. I'm literally on my boat every single day of the week in the summer. I even go out in the rain sometimes. And I could go from Meredith over the Wolfboro and count on two hands the amount of vessels I see. Now, the weekdays, the weekends, I will say, is a completely different argument. We have a lot of people from out of state that come out. Boat registrations are up throughout the state, but that does not mean people are using their vessels. Last year, I saw a drastic decrease in the amount of boats on the water, even on the weekend, due to gas prices. It's just common sense. We have much smaller bodies of water that do not have a speed limit. And on our biggest open body of water in the state, we are regulating and restricting certain vessels. There's some people that even say they don't want any boats on Lake Winnipesaukee. I had 3 people say that to me today. That's nonsense. We need the revenue. We need the tourism. I used to be able to go to bars and restaurants and places on the lake on a Wednesday and not be able to find a dock space. Ever since the speed limit was enacted, I've seen weekday boat usage drastically decline. Hotels that used to be fully booked are no longer fully booked during the weekdays. It's an economy issue as well to the Lakes region, and I really think we should have some common sense and allow, quote unquote, high performance vessels to participate on our lake and have equal access to our lake. The other issue is in regards to equal access. If you own a motor vessel, you have to pay a registration fee. Those users of kayaks, canoes, paddleboards do not pay a registration fee for access to the lake. That's not equal access to me. We also have, in regards to the 150-foot rule, I'm going to bite my tongue off on this, constantly see people breaking this rule. I think Marine Patrol should spend more time enforcing that rule than the noise ordinance or the speed limit on the lake. Again, I just look for you guys to make the right decision. The Lakes region economy is very important to me and many people, and I don't think we should be chasing away people that would like to come to the area and spend their money. I appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
Representative, will you accept questions?
Yes, I will.
Does anyone have a question of the representative?
Thank you for taking my question. I was a physics teacher. Can you tell me where that rule is? Because I really would like to see it. Is it part of Bernoulli's principle? I'm not really sure.
Which rule are you?
The one on the faster it goes, the less it roll. You said the higher the boat, the faster the boat goes, the less
The less weight at the rollers. I can email the committee the actual information.
You did?
I can.
Thank you very much, because as a physics teacher, I'm really interested. Thank you.
Oh no, it's very detailed. It's like 30 pages long.
Just tell me which rule it is and I'll look it up.
I'll have to look it up on my phone.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions for the representative? It would help me, members of the committee, if you raise your hand if you want to ask questions. I don't see any hands raised. So thank you, Representative, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up is Representative McDonald, and on deck is Robert Lemieux, if I said it right. Representative McDonald, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, everyone, colleagues. My name is John McDonald, and I represent the folks of the town of Wolfboro and the community of Tuftonboro. And we have about probably 8,000 people year-round in those two communities, and we probably go up to about 40,000 during the summer months. I'm a lifelong resident of Wolfboro, and I'd say I've probably got several thousand hours of boating experience on Lake Winnipesaukee. I retired from a 30-year career in law enforcement, and during my career I worked for the New Hampshire Marine Patrol. And I was the boating education officer full-time for the entire state, and I probably spoke to several thousand people about boating safety issues and providing boating education. I'm also a graduate of the National Coast Guard Safe Boating School, and I'm also a licensed commercial boat operator up to 70 feet and 700 horsepower. For the past several years, I've been a captain on the Winnipesaukee Belle, which does daily cruises on Lake Winnipesaukee and also charters during the evening. I appreciate my colleague and my friend's comments concerning the economy. I'm not seeing that in my community. We're busy, a lot of boats, a lot of people. Motels and hotels are sold out. We just spent about $650,000 on the docks in town to remodel those, and we also provide assistance in docking boats. So we're spending a lot of money to keep everything going. Over the years, I've seen a lot of changes, and the past 10 years since this law's been in effect, I don't know what he's trying to change. The only thing that's increased, the lake isn't any bigger, and it's not any smaller. It's about the same size. The same considerations that the members back in, I guess it was 2010, when they passed this speed limit, still exist. We still have a lot of boats. We have more people that aren't just doing water skiing and driving around, but they're using it as a mode of transportation, either going from an island property to shore to get groceries or to a restaurant to have dinner. The big thing about boats, and I ask you folks to consider this, is we restrict speed on snowmobiles or HRVs. And what do boats not have that those type of vehicles have? Brakes. A boat doesn't have any brakes. All you can do is put it in neutral and hope to slow down. Again, we still have safety concerns as 10 years ago. I like to think we hear a lot about cigarette boats and all the money that people have spent on cigarette boats. I look at it as, if I go out and buy a Corvette and a Porsche that can do 200 miles an hour, I still have to go 60 or 65 miles per hour on the interstate. A boat shouldn't be any different. If they want to go out and do 100 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour, they can slide down and go on the ocean. We'll support that. I'd ask you folks to not pass this bill, ITL it, and let the state consider their efforts in promoting boating safety to keep the lakes, especially Lake Winnipesaukee, safe for everyone, not just the high-speed boats. Thank you.
You take questions, Representative?
Yes.
Does anyone have a question of the representative? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next up, Mr. Lemereau, who's in support of the bill, and on deck, Lieutenant Dennis Wade of the Department of Safety. Mr. Lemereau?
Have to press that. Thank you very much for hearing me. I do have some documents that I don't know how to get them to somebody, or is somebody going to get them from me. I appreciate you listening for a minute. I basically wanted to get into talking about hydrodynamics and aerodynamics of boats that it seems like nobody pays attention to. Aerodynamics and hydrodynamics are heavily involved with the way boats run. When you put a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit on the lake, that 45 is pretty slow to pack enough air underneath those boats to get the boats to ride properly. All the new technology coming out in these new boats is going to have aero and hydrodynamics involved in them. Look at the hulls. When you look at the hulls, they have different steps in them. Well, those are all about the air and the hydraulics. And exactly what this gentleman had said about the waves, he's correct. You know, the waves isn't the problem. It's the ice. I'm on the lake. Destroys my front yard every time. Pushes all the rocks, pushes all the boulders. I haven't seen any boat waves ever make any difference on the shore, but I certainly see the ice. So if someone wants to tell you that, go take a look at what the ice did. Come to my yard. As far as the personal effect that was on me is, I get a fish boat. My fish boat is a tunnel boat. That tunnel boat doesn't even begin to work at 45. So he wanted me to go 45, but I can't get the boat up out of the water enough to clear the way. So I just beat the crap out of myself driving around the lake. I mean, it's pretty unfair. The other thing is that, we're going to lose out on a lot of technology in these boats. These boats are going to have more air and more aerodynamics and hydrodynamics built into them. And we're gonna miss out on those boats, beautiful technology boats that we're not gonna be able to get on the lake because your speed limit's too slow. Now, you know, I've raced hydroplanes all my life, and you go around in these other states and countries, and they laugh at us because we got a speed limit on Winnipesaukee. They laugh at us. It's kind of embarrassing. But anyway, now, the other thing that I wanted to mention, to change subjects, is, you know, the law should be for the majority, not cater to a small minority who really have no knowledge of the effect on everyone. I mean, they think they have the knowledge of the effect on everybody, but they don't. I don't know how they get away with it. And then they sit in front of their computer and they use their computer and make themselves look almighty God powerful and fill you full of crap. And I don't think that's right. I think it's totally wrong for us to listen to a small little group. You know, you need to listen to the big group, the big taxpayer. If you put this on a ballot, it'll probably get wiped out and end up with no speed limit, because there's more people that are probably in favor of no speed limit than no speed limit. Now, I'm approaching my 2 minutes, I'm sure. The last thing that I want to make mention is, you know, the lake is very dangerous and very unforgiving. I mean, you can die easily in that lake, all right? And I've done many, many, many small boat, canoe, and kayak paddle rescues, trips out there, you know, getting people with these small little boats. They always seem to be in trouble, and there's a lot of deaths there. But, you know, we're not stopping them. And there's a lot of deaths in these small little boats.
If you could bring it to a conclusion.
And we don't stop them. I just doesn't make any sense to me. So I hope that everybody here has common sense for all and not for a small minority. Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it.
Do you take questions?
Yes,
Anyone have a question for the,
Mr. Lamoureux.
go ahead, in the front. Representative, I can't, were you raising your hand? I guess not. All right, I guess no questions? I don't see any hands way up. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Before Lieutenant Wade speaks, on deck, Harry Vogel. Harry Vogel. Lieutenant, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good afternoon. I'm Lieutenant Dennis Wade, Commander of New Hampshire State Police Marine Patrol. I'm here representing the Department of Safety, the Division of State Police, and to testify against House Bill 448. Lake Winnipesaukee is one of 30 lakes in New Hampshire where there is a per se speed law. The speed limit on most of these other 30 lakes is 10 miles an hour, with just a few being above that. Winnipesaukee currently has a speed limit of 45 miles an hour from 1/2 hour before sunrise to 1/2 hour after sunset, basically daytime, and 30 miles an hour at nighttime. These speed limits are not absolute, as they are allowed only where no other hazard exists, where a lower speed is required. These hazards include, but are not limited to, boat traffic, weather, waves, sun glare, swimmers, and water debris. Driving a boat at 65 miles an hour can be dangerous. A boat moving at 45 miles an hour is traveling at 66 feet per second, where a boat traveling at 65 miles an hour is traveling at 95 feet per second, almost 30 feet difference. That 30 feet can determine the time needed for a driver to avoid a crash. The average perception and reaction time for a person is approximately 1.5 seconds. This is perception and reaction time for a driver who is actively paying attention. In that 1.5 seconds, a boat traveling at 45 miles an hour will travel 99 feet. At 65 miles an hour, that boat will travel 142 feet. Again, this is reaction time. Then the driver's actions have to take place to actually avoid whatever hazard exists. Unlike motor vehicles, boats do not have brakes, requiring additional stopping time and distance on the water. An operator can only throttle back and maybe even put the boat into reverse. Still, this will not stop a boat quickly, and the steerage of a boat does not operate the same when it's in neutral. Lake Winnipesaukee is used for many different recreational activities: water skiing, swimming, canoeing, kayaking, fishing, sailing, motorboating, and many more. There needs to be a balance by the use of all these recreationalists, to include motorboats. Although there is an area defined in this law where the 65-mile-an-hour speed limit would be allowed, that would be hard to distinguish. There are no defined edges in the water like you have on the roads. There's no sidewalks, there's no yellow and white lines, no travel lanes, and no traffic control devices. Add in that not everyone on the lake knows the lake, has been there before, and will not be familiar with the boundaries discerned by this law. This can make for a very dangerous mix. Having the area defined through written law will not be the same as having a clearly defined area that a boater can understand. When driving a road, the road is defined. You know when you're turning onto or off of a road. You have curbs and intersections. You also have speed limit signs, traffic control devices, caution signs, yield signs. This will not be the case in Lake Winnipesaukee should this law pass. How will a boater know when they're in the 65-mile-an-hour zone? Not necessarily because they plan on going fast, but so they can be more cautious of other boaters that might. There are kids and other novice boaters who boat on this lake. Are they going to know where they are and what hazards to look for? In order to sign this area so all users knew that this was a 65-mile-per-hour zone, it would take an unknown number of buoys to be placed at an unknown cost. Buoys in unexpected places can also pose a hazard. We do not want to create additional hazards, especially in an area that does not necessarily have environmental obstructions. This would also take away from the beauty of the lake. Two other items to consider. Boats do not have seat belts. Nothing to keep a passenger in a boat should the driver have to throttle back at 65 miles an hour to neutral, or should it get hit by another boat or run aground. There are no airbags, no roof, nothing for protecting the passengers from being ejected should a dangerous situation occur. Think of the interstate. We do not allow bicycles and pedestrians on the interstate because of the speed limit. Having a boat going 65 miles an hour near someone canoeing, kayaking, or sailing can be a recipe for disaster. And although these motorboats have just as much right to the lake, again, as anyone else, there needs to be a balance. In summary, the Department of Safety does not recommend passage of this legislation. It creates an enhanced concern for safety of all users in this area, will cause confusion among boaters, especially those who are unfamiliar with the lake, and as presented, does not allow for proper enforcement of the zone based on the description of the area.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Does anyone have any questions for the Lieutenant? Representative Darby, will you take questions, Lieutenant?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. In online testimony, we heard a number of people comment on the decrease in marine patrol on Lake Winnipesaukee. Myself, having a camp on a small lake in southwest New Hampshire, have also noticed a significant decrease in marine patrol. I was wondering if the Department of Safety feels that the coverage, the marine patrol coverage is adequate, and if not, if you could comment on why there's a decrease in the marine patrol coverage. Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's not adequate. The reasoning is probably like every other law enforcement agency in the state and in the country. Everybody's having a hard time filling these positions. Unlike many other agencies, we have mostly a seasonal or part-time staff. We only have 9 full-time staff throughout the year as far as law enforcement. The rest of them are seasonal staff, some who actually work throughout the year, but many who do just what you expect, come in around April, May, maybe June, work throughout the summer, and then go back to their other jobs. Many are retired, many are college kids. So we are definitely below what we would like to see for staffing, and it's certainly an issue with enforcement, being out there, being present, and just letting people know we're out there. So it's a very difficult thing to do, and we're always weighing where we need to be and how many of us should be there.
Any other questions for the Lieutenant? I don't see any. Thank you, Lieutenant, for your testimony. Before I ask Mr. Vogel to come up, I have about 23 cards all opposed to this bill. I've run out of cards for anyone in favor, and we normally alternate. Is there anyone else to speak in favor that hasn't entered a pink card? I'll ask one more time. Anybody else in favor that hasn't filled out a pink card? Hearing none, I'll ask Mr. Vogel to come up, and Mr. Strodel is on deck. Mr. Vogel.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. For the record, my name is Harry Vogel. I am the Senior Biologist and Executive Director of the Loon Preservation Committee. I also sit on the Environmental Policy Committee of New Hampshire Audubon, and I'm representing that organization as well this afternoon. Loon Preservation Committee and New Hampshire Audubon oppose House Bill 448 for two reasons. The first reason is concerns about our loon population. Loons are a state-threatened species in New Hampshire. LPC's intensive management has more than tripled the population of loons in this state, but loons face some big challenges, including the challenge of fast-moving boats and personal watercraft. Collisions with boats and personal watercraft account for 13.8% of known causes of adult loon deaths on Winnipesaukee. That is 8 times the percentage of other lakes in the state. Mortalities from boat collisions also affect loon nesting success, because once you lose a member of a loon pair, it can be years before a loon finds a new mate and returns to productivity. Boat collisions also affect the survival of loon chicks. Young loons are small and dark. They are not easily seen by boaters, and they are too buoyant to dive away from a fast-moving boat. Those fast-moving boats are very common on Lake Winnipesaukee, and loons on Winnipesaukee have seen larger declines in their population and their breeding success compared to loons in other areas of the state. The loon population on Winnipesaukee has declined from an historical level of 40 to 50 pairs to an average of just 28 pairs. Collisions with boats and personal watercraft are one of the largest known causes of loon chick mortality on Winnipesaukee. Fewer than 7 out of 10 loon chicks that are hatched on Winnie survive to fledging. That's 10% below the statewide average. Loons on Winnipesaukee have fledged fewer than 0.4 chicks per pair per year on the lake. That is 19% below the statewide average, and that breeding success is not enough to maintain a viable population of loons on the lake. The second reason that Loon Preservation Committee and New Hampshire Audubon oppose this bill is concerns about our biologists and our volunteers on the lake. So this summer, the Loon Preservation Committee will have 12 biologists on New Hampshire's lakes working for the public good and to protect the socially and economically important wildlife species. Some of those biologists will be on Lake Winnipesaukee, and they will spend more than 400 hours on the lake in a small Boston whaler. Our boats have a top speed of about 35 miles an hour, but they will be able to cover the entire lake very well. Over the years, as we have seen more and faster boats on Winnipesaukee, I have had increasing concerns about the safety of our biologists and our volunteers on the lake. And speed limits have helped to alleviate some of those concerns. And the final point that I would like to make is that loons are the tip of the iceberg. And so the same things that are affecting loons are affecting mergansers and mallards and otters and other wildlife. Loons and our other lake wildlife bring residents and visitors to our state. They contribute to our economy and to the spirit that makes our lake special to New Hampshire's residents and visitors. It would be a shame to lose the very qualities that have attracted both loons and people to our lakes. So the Loon Preservation Committee and New Hampshire Audubon support limiting excessive speed on our lakes, and so we oppose House Bill 448. That is the end of my testimony. I would be happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Vogel? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Up next, Mr. Strodel. On deck, Mr. Ratcliffe. Mr. Strodel. Can you turn on the mic? You have to press the button so it goes red. There you go.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Strodel. I am a longtime New Hampshire resident. I'm a second-generation camp director, and I've been in charge of Camp Brookwoods and Camp Deer Run for 30 years. We also operate a camp called Moose River Outpost in Maine. Let me tell you how happy I am to be running 2 camps in New Hampshire and not 2 camps in Maine. It is hard to run a camp in Maine, so thank you for all the good stuff you're doing to help support New Hampshire camps. We are opposed to this bill for the basic reason is we're concerned about safety. There are approximately 14 camps on Lake Winnipesaukee. There's only about 3 McDonald's around the lake, and I'm not sure how many Dollar Generals, but there's a lot of camps around the lake. We've got up to 1,000 campers at our lake alone, and we represent, along with the other camps, approximately $1/3 billion as far as input. The reason I oppose this is considered safety. That's the bottom line. I don't care about the hydrodynamics. I care about the safety of the kids. Look over at this wall right over here first. Now look at this wall over here. In less than a second, a boat traveling 65 miles an hour will transverse that distance, and a camper cannot get out of the way if a camper's in a canoe, a kayak, or a sailboat. So we'd appreciate it if you turn down this bill. Thank you.
Do you accept questions? Anybody have any questions for Mr. Strodel? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Up next is Mr. Radcliffe, and on deck, Kate LeMay. Mr. Radcliffe.
Good afternoon. My name is John Radcliffe. I graduated from Maine Maritime Academy in 1983. I've been a professional mariner for 40 years. I hold an unlimited tonnage master license upon oceans, which is the highest license the Coast Guard issues. In addition to that, I have a master ocean towing of 1,600 ton, master ocean fishing 3,000 ton, master high-speed vessel, and OIM MODU, among other certifications. I've lived in New Hampshire and boated here for over 30 years. Over the 30 years on the Big Lake, I've watched the situation deteriorate as the go-fast boats take whatever piece of the water they wanted, pushing the kayakers, canoers, and anyone on smaller, slower boats off the water out of fear. I've watched commentary on local social media of people being swamped by boaters, ignoring wake zones and right-of-way, and the response from many was the laughing emoji and "you should get a bigger boat." Indeed, one couple I know in their late 70s, having their lunch at anchor within 150 feet of a shoreline, were swamped so badly they had $5,000 damages to their boat. They were knocked around the boat, and fortunately, while they were not injured, they easily could have been. There's no doubt we've lost consideration for others on this lake. In the course of my career, I worked aboard a high-speed vessel, Westpac Express, in service to the Marine Corps in the mid-2000s. On that vessel, which had a maximum speed of approximately 40 knots, on open ocean, not 65 plus in enclosed waters full of skiers, kayakers, and yes, there are kayakers in the Broads, crossing between the islands, the swimmers also. We had to maintain a bridge watch on that vessel as follows: 2 men in control chairs at all times within arm's reach of the throttles, 1 licensed engineer sitting in a command chair above and behind us, whose job was to act as a third lookout. On this vessel, we had ECDIS, ARPA, AIS, and other modern safety features. On that vessel, if I wished to get up and relieve myself, I had to have the chief engineer in the chair behind me and the other command chair occupied just to be able to stand up. There's no distractions on such a vessel, no music, no visitors, and obviously no alcohol. Let's contrast this with a go-fast boat on the lake, with kids on board or beers in hand, or sometimes both. Towels and toys flying about the boat at all speed, all of which are distractions to the operator. No formal training, no collision avoidance equipment. The boat's operating in constricted waters with small buoys, kayaks, wakeboarders, and the occasional swimmer. As I mentioned earlier, I've been on this lake for over 30 years. In that 30 years, I've been swamped several times. I've had many close calls. Each time it was a boat operating at excess of speed. In the 2 cases where I called the Marine Patrol and the operator was stopped, alcohol wasn't a factor. Speed and stupidity were. The lake is becoming a wild west of boating, with those who have the biggest, fastest boats claiming the right of way. Having the money to buy a bigger, faster boat has no correlation to experience or nautical skills. The lake just isn't big enough or open enough for boats to operate at these speeds requested. There's no time savings, and attempts to claim that this is just an excuse. If you do the math, the speed difference between the current speed limit and a boat doing 80 miles an hour traversing the Broads ends up to a difference of 4 minutes. That's from the southern tip of Rattlesnake to Sandy Island. It's all about the fun factor, and that person's fun shouldn't outweigh the safety of others. If you don't have 4 minutes to spare, then maybe you should take up another hobby.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Radcliffe? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Ms. LeMay, on deck, Mr. Hutchins.
Hello.
Hi.
My name's Kate LeMay. I just want to first thank you all for your service to our communities and just the people that have spoken. I think the care and thoughtfulness they put into their points is really important. So I am the Senior Executive Director at the YMCA camps of Greater Boston, and they own Sandy Island, which is at the corner of the Broads in this in the map where this is affected. My statement is that we're opposed to the increased speed limit, obviously because of camper safety. But what I would also say, just in being here, is that if this restriction happens and the decision is that this is the one spot where boats can go 65 miles an hour, it is going to concentrate that speed into this section of the lake. And our camp services about 1,000 people a summer, but many of them are families with young kids. And one of the great aspects of our property in this facility is that once you pass a swim test, you're able to sail around the island, paddleboard, kayak. Its safety is one of the key aspects of this camp. So I would say that I'm just really grateful that the speed limit is currently 45, because I think that people, as you increase the speed limit, their decisions of what they can do to go faster is just going to increase. So that isn't just 65. 65 could mean 85. 65 could mean 75. And concentrating it in the Broads has a significant, I mean, it's right, it touches half the property of this island. So I'm just grateful that the speed limit's 45 for now. Thanks.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next up, Mr. Hutchkins, and on deck, Ms. J. Newton on deck.
Good afternoon. I'm Warren Hutchins of Guilford, New Hampshire, and I am against the bill requesting that you ITL it. I am a multi-generational New Hampshire native, and I live full-time on Lake Winnipesaukee. I have been an active boater my entire life. I am a combat veteran of Vietnam, having been involved in serious safety situations that happened very quickly. Like you, I've devoted my time and efforts for the people of New Hampshire. I have served the 34 communities of the Lakes Region Planning Commission for over a dozen years on its executive committee, serving as chair for multiple years. This commission supported the speed limits of 45-30 on the Big Lake. During these years, I also served the people of Laconia as chair of the planning board. The Laconia City Council also supported the speed limits on the lake to promote safety and economic development. There are very few regulations concerning boating operations on our New Hampshire lakes in comparison to other modes of recreation and transportation. Boating speed limits are just common sense for safety recreation for all types of drivers. The Lakes region is a driver for our state's economy, in large part due to Lake Winnipesaukee. Please ITL this very selfish request of a very few presented for their personal thrills at the safety risk of all other boaters. The current law of 45-30 was a negotiated law, and at that time there was much discussion concerning the Broads. This is a major part of the lake, and it is like a major intersection that so many boats of different sizes need to cross to get to major ports or residential areas on the lake for simple enjoyment. Please honor the work of your predecessors in the House and Senate and do not modify the simple to understand safety regulation. This is the 14th hearing on this simple common sense regulation. Enough is enough. The prime sponsor of this bill presented the same concept last year at the same time. The Transportation Committee voted to ITL this bill. Here they are again before another committee. Last year, the Broads were presented, and the lake were presented as large as the Manchester Airport by the prime sponsor. This really supports the need for recreation boating speed limits for all types of boats. The airport is very controlled, as you are all well aware. Nothing moves without a pilot or ground air controllers. There are very well marked runways, very limited access to the field. I could go on and on. The Broads on Lake Winnipesaukee have none of these, and boating operators range from the very young to the very old, very experienced to the very new. The lake is for New Hampshire residents and recreational guests, not a racetrack for a few. The ocean is near and wide open. Let them race there. Thank you very much.
Any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Next up, Mr. Newton on deck, Abigail Adams. Mr.
Hello,
Newton.
I'm Jay Newton, and I'm here representing myself and Mel Ingalls, who could not be here. We both are Guilford residents. And we're both in opposition to HB 448. We both live on the lake. He lives there all year long, and I live there in the summer on Welch Island, which is adjacent to the area they want to increase the speed on. And I just have to diverge from so first of all, don't be worried about my large packet here. I'm only covering the first page. The next 4 pages are something about a safe system approach, and the last 5 are about Mel's accident. He is on the lake every day when there isn't any ice. He kayaks from his home out into the Broads, through the islands and back every day. And so he has a lot of familiarity with that. And he had the unfortunate experience in September of 2020 of being run over by a boat that was racing another boat. So he has definite information about how speed affects people's decisions, how people make mistakes, and it can cause big problems on the lake. So very quickly, safety is paramount in a recreation area. The Broads are like a park. My wife and I look out, and Mel sees this every day. It's just people either floating in their boats, sunbathing, with kids all around swimming, pulling kids on a tube, paddleboarders, windsurfers, canoers, sailors, people fishing. It's just a nice place to hang out. It's like a park in the middle of a busy city, because the rest of the lake, with 30,000 temporary licenses in addition to all the standard permanent licenses that we have, is just crazy. Just the 2-mile trip I take from my dock on Welch Island to get to the mainland can be harrowing. You don't know when people are going to turn, come at you. You look once at 1 minute, everything looks good. The next minute, there are 3 boats coming, and there's a kayak you have to avoid, and a sailboat that's coming over this way that you have to avoid. So basically, it's a place, a little more room where people can enjoy themselves and feel safer. So the other part of this is about safety and about how speed affects safety. And I bring up the U.S. Department of Transportation Safe System Approach. It's something that's been working its way around the world, and our DOT is finally adopting it. And it basically has a few tenets, and the most important of which is serious injury and death are unacceptable. We used to, I think, accept some deaths. We knew that if we raised the speed limit, it would increase the number of deaths on the road. It was a known fact. And yet we thought, well, for commerce, we got to get people to their jobs, we got to get goods and services delivered and so forth. They're saying, no more. So they have a multi-pronged approach, which is detailed in the next 5 pages. But basically, one of the major tenets is that humans make mistakes. We have wonderfully designed highways, we have really safe cars now, and yet, in the last 7 years, we've gone from 30,000 deaths caused by cars in the United States to 40,000. That's a 30% increase. And so a big part of that is speed. And they say that speed kills. And I have these little speed limit signs here. So at 23 miles per hour, if you get hit by a car, you have a 90% chance of not dying. At 58, not even the 65 that they're advocating in this bill, you have a 10% chance of surviving. And I would say this translates pretty well to the water, but it's even worse on the water if you consider the dangers of drowning. If you get hit by a hit-and-run car and you're lying on the roadside, there's probably a chance that somebody's going to come along and see you and maybe be able to save you. If you're sinking in the water, somebody might not even know that you even were hit. And even if they know you're there, they might be looking for you and they might not see you on the bottom. So, and then the other part is being injured by the boat's propellers, which is what happened to Mel. He was severely cut on his legs by the boat's propellers. It had 2 motors. Each motor has a propeller with 4 blades spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute. And they caused him serious injury that had him laid up for several months. He's now back with a healthy lifestyle. He does have some parts of his body that don't work the same as they used to. We're happy he survived. So the last thing is a quote, or next to last is a quote.
Can you bring
from-
it to a conclusion, Mr. Newton?
Yeah, the last thing, the quote from the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. And if anybody knows how many people are being injured and died, it's the insurance people. Speed is unforgiving of human error, making collisions both more likely to occur and more deadly. So in summation, I'd like to say a vote to oppose HB 448 is a vote for safety and to preserve the recreation area known as the Broads on Lake Winnipesaukee. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Newton? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Okay, thank you.
Up next, Ms. Adams, and on deck, Barbara Fioravanti. Ms. Adams.
This is on. This is on. Hello, my name is Abby Adams, and I live in Wolfboro, New Hampshire, and I oppose HB 448. I want to call attention to the 2021 U.S. Coast Guard recreational boating statistics. It lists the top 5 causes of accidents as operator inattention, operator inexperience, improper lookout, machinery failure, and excessive speed. Alcohol actually comes in at 6. And yes, while boating while intoxicated has been a persistent problem on Lake Winnipesaukee, but a boat that is speeding along at 65 miles an hour with an impaired driver is far more likely to cause accidents and death than one who is obeying the speed limit. A family boater trying to avoid a collision with an oncoming speeding boat has a better chance of avoiding an accident if the boat is traveling at 45 miles per hour or less. And now bass fishing boats, jet skis, and even family boats have the capacity for going 50, 60, 80, even 100 miles per hour. You have heard examples of accidents which have occurred on Winnipesaukee, and I'm enclosing one testimony from Captain Levy from the Marine Patrol as part of my testimony that involved a swimmer struck by a boat going over 65 miles an hour. Another, outlined in an email to the committee, occurred in 2020 and involved a 32-foot speedboat which hit a kayaker at 35 miles per hour. Said boat driver never even saw the kayaker, and you have heard that the victim continues to suffer permanent and ongoing injuries. If the speedboat had been going 65 miles an hour, this accident would undoubtedly have been fatal. So please keep in mind that the number of people obtaining their boat license in New Hampshire has increased from 6,500 in 2019 to over 30,000 in 2020. That's a 500% increase in new and inexperienced boaters on our lakes. New Hampshire boat registrations have increased almost 15% since 2013. Increasing speed, even if, quote, just in the Broads, is unsafe given the sharp increase in boat registrations and the significant understaffing of the New Hampshire Department of Safety. The Broads is the hub of the lake where people must pass to get from one port to another. Sailors, anglers, family boaters use the Broads. Some family boaters just pull up anchor and drift with the wind from north to south in the Broads. And finally, as a member of the Wolfboro Waters Committee and chair of the Wolfboro Waters Communications Subcommittee, I work closely with the Lake Winnipesaukee Association. You should be aware that both of these organizations have opposed HB 448. We urge you to vote ITL. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Adams? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, Barbara Fioravanti on deck. I don't know if she wants to speak. If she's here, it says she doesn't need any time. Melanie Ratcliffe. Melanie, are you here?
She's gone.
She says no time, so we'll put her card aside. On deck after Barbara is Alan Posnack. Ms. Fioravanti.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Barbara Fioravanti. I'm a full-time resident of Tufton Borough and owner of a lakefront home on Lake Winnipesaukee. I am also a boater, both power, paddle and sail, and I'm also a seaplane pilot. I am opposed to this bill, HB 448. The proposal for increase in the speed limit on Winnipesaukee from 45 miles an hour to 65 miles an hour was defeated last year for good reason. The conditions have not changed. The proposed restricted area of the increased speed limit, known as the Broads, in this bill is defined as the entire central part of the lake. This means that all other craft, including slower sailboats, pontoon boats, fishing boats, and paddlecraft wishing to travel from one town or bay to another, must pass through an area of traffic traveling at automobile highway speeds. Picture a bicycle crossing a 1.5 mile wide I-93. On a busy summer day, the traffic on the Broads is heavy and traveling in many directions. Typical wave action on the Broads can hide a small boat until dangerously close. Besides the danger, the majority of users of the lake would find their enjoyment curtailed for the pleasure of the few. For those who wish to engage in high-speed racing on the lake, special permits can be issued for sanctioned races with
Very lenient in letting everybody come over the 2 minutes. And now that we're on the second half of everyone to speak against, if you can keep your remarks to the 2 minutes, that would be appreciated, especially if you have handouts, which I will give the members time to read before we exec. Thank you, Mr.
Do you mean
Parsons.
starting with the next speaker?
Sure.
I'd like to point out that I drove down here at 60 miles an hour in a car that can probably go 120. That's just the way the world works. I'd like to speak to the proposed boundaries and also to enforceability of this act. In the handout you have, could I ask you to look at the second page, which has a chart of the lake on it. And you can see in that chart that the sponsors have carved out a race course on the best part of our lake. And broadly speaking, those boundaries are carelessly drawn and they're dangerous. And it looks clean on paper, but there are no yellow lines on the lake. They'll be hard to enforce, if not impossible, and hard for visiting boaters to observe. If you look at the chart and start at the top left, the boundary actually crosses the middle of Sandy Island. It almost touches Tuftonboro Neck, and it crosses Wolfboro Neck. This invites boaters to skirt the shore, and the legal distance of 150 feet is way too close to be traveling at 65 miles an hour. If you move down that northern boundary of the line, it passes Parker Island, and there's a fairly narrow channel between Parker Island and the shore, and that is cut in half by 2 black buoys, and the remaining channel is definitely too narrow for travel at that speed. If you go way to the lower right corner of your picture, near buoy 78, the high-speed area encompasses Moose Island, Ship Island, a bunch of rocks and shallow area, and 6 navigational buoys. That's probably not what you would expect in a high-speed zone. Further, the bill says that the course should pass outside of Rattlesnake Island. And you'll see in the chart, I question that. Which way is outside? We may think we know, but I believe it's ambiguous. It depends on your reference point. It'll certainly be ambiguous to a visitor. Is that for me?
It might be a good hint.
The next page shows what's informally called the Upper Broads, and that is a wide open space. It's not within this boundary, but I find it very hard to imagine that boaters who are enjoying these high speeds will stop in the boundaries. They'll zoom all the way up through the Upper Broads. And the last thing I want to say is, what about 65 miles an hour? Last year, the bill was for unlimited speeds, and they've kind of softened it this year to 65. And to me, that's a joke, maybe even an insult, because who the heck can tell the difference, Marine Patrol or any one of us, whether somebody's going 65 or 80 or even 100. So in my view, this bill is impractical, dangerous, unenforceable. and you all know what to do. Thank you.
Questions for the speaker? Yes, Mr. McHugh, Representative McHugh.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. Is it,
Yes, sir.
Is it Mr. Posnack?
Yes, sir.
Would you believe that of the hundreds of emails in written testimony we got in opposition to this bill, yours with the nautical charts was my favorite?
Oh, good. It's good reading.
Thank you for pointing out that some of the references went straight through a landmass. So I enjoyed reading this the other night when I got it.
Well, hopefully these boaters will choose not to travel across the landmass, but the suggestion is that they're supposed to drive very close to it.
When I got the chart, it was speaking my language, so thank you for sending that.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. No further questions? Thank you for your testimony. Up next, Mr. Hennessy. On deck, Mr. Keeler.
Okay. My name is Brian Hennessy, and last week you all received documentation of a serious accident on Winnipesaukee in 2020, dealing how a speedboat going 35 miles an hour never even saw a kayaker. The victim's life is forever changed. But I want to quickly discuss two other reasons why this bill should be voted ITL. Number one, our local economy. Prior to the passage of the speed limit, Winnipesaukee had suffered from a reputation as being a cowboy Wild West destination. Several fatal and high-profile accidents involving high-powered speedboats had contributed to this reputation. And this is why over 300 businesses signed in to support the speed limit law. We worked very hard over 10 years ago to adopt speed limits on the lake and can attest they have made a remarkable difference on the improved atmosphere of tranquility and safety for all who recreate there. A recent study conducted by Dartmouth College and commissioned by the Lake Winnipesaukee Association showed that the lake generates over $17 billion for the region and state. Tourists, anglers, primary and secondary homeowners are attracted to the lake for its special, beautiful recreation. They feel safer boating, as do we, with the current speed limits. Why abolish the speed limits for a select few at the expense of the majority? We have many associations and businesses that support our current speed limit. Lakes Region Conservation Trust, New Hampshire Lakes Association, Lake Winnie Association, Lake Winnie Sailing Association, Wolfboro Waters Town Committee, Loon Preservation Committee, Sandy Island Camp, several other camps, the list goes on, and 6 marinas. Now, why would a marina be against HB 448? They cater to family boaters, and that's where they're making their money. Finally, I want to point out that the public supports our present speed limit. On May 5th, 2010, the New Hampshire House voted 268 to 79 on a roll call vote in favor of the bill. In 2011, a Magellan poll was completed showing 70% of those surveyed in favor of the 4530 law and 69 against, 55 in the Broads. On May 18th, 2011, the full House of Representatives voted to uphold the speed limit, 276 yeas to 75 nays, 45 not voting. Only 3 out of the 20 reps from towns bordering the lake voted against our 4530 speed limit bill. And of course, last year, another bill which would have increased the speed limit on Winnipesaukee was voted down by the Transportation Committee by a 17-3 margin. I urge you to vote ITL. Thank you. Any questions?
I don't see any questions. Thank you for your testimony. Up, Mr. Keeler. On deck, Mr. Joseph. Douglas
Members of
Joseph.
the committee, my name is Jeff Keeler. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm a lifelong resident of New Hampshire, and I've been on Lake Winnipesaukee since the early 60s. I own property on Bear Island, and I can tell you on the weekends up there in the afternoon, we don't go out on the lake unless it's an emergency. It is such a zoo out there. There are boats going every different direction, and as testified by other people before, inattention on the lake, if you're traveling at 65 miles an hour, in the space of 10 seconds, you cover more than 4 football fields. I could bore you with all the details of the safety issues, but the truth of the matter is this is a bill that's about the wants of a few versus the needs of all, and that the needs to be safe. As I believe that the committee is going to make the decision based on common sense and intelligence, I'll leave it to you to do your job, and thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? No, thank you for your testimony. Next up, Mr. Joseph. On deck, Mr. Gurka. You need to press the button so it lights up. There you go. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Douglas Joseph. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I've been in this state for 55 years, on this lake, in practice for 40 years. I'm acting in opposition to House Bill 448. My family boats through the Broads regularly when we boat to Wolfboro, Tuftonboro, Alton Bay, or down to Center Harbor for dinner or shopping. Thousands of other islanders do the same. As a physician involved with trauma care my whole career, I can attest to the dangers of high-speed injuries on our lake, on our state's highways. Injuries to boating accidents are no different, except that they may also involve drowning. High-speed boaters causing injury and even death to slower speed sailors, water skiers, tubers, paddlers, and swimmers are like cars striking motorcyclists, bicyclists, and pedestrians. I have seen these critical injuries and treated their grave problems and counseled their grieving families due to these horrifying accidents. Fortunately, we have not seen these high-speed accidents on Lake Winnipesaukee for many years because of the 45-30 miles per hour law. It's been working fine since 2009. The lake has been safer and more pleasurable over the last 14 years. My family's boating back and forth from our island camp to the mainland has become much more comfortable with less anxiety than it was before the law. Each time we crossed the channel before these speed limits, we felt we were boating for our lives. The fast boats would come out of nowhere, roaring through the channel and elsewhere where we boated on the lake. Boating wasn't fun. It was incredibly stressful. Please do not take us back to those times. Vote against HB 448 and keep the 45-30 miles per hour law as it is with no changes. Keep us safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Thank you for your testimony. Up next, Mr. Gurka. I hope I pronounced it correctly. And on deck, Sandy Helve. Giuca, which is pronounced Mr. Judah.
As a Lakes Region businessman and boater, I believe an increase in the maximum allowed boat speed could negatively impact the businesses, boat safety, and family life. Last year, the same House bill was passed, but was voted down, and I question why it's back. Are there more important issues for our representatives than refiling bills they lost the previous year? Local businesses around this lake benefited from the current speed conditions because boaters and families feel safe boating, going from town to town, shopping, frequenting restaurants, ice cream shops, and stores. I see the boat traffic every year. I live in Wolfboro. I visit their town docks. I go to Meredith. I go to Alton. They also go to the Weirs. To boat from town to town generally means crossing through the Broads, the largest open section of the lake. But this is also where the high-speeding boats will be. If a speed increase is allowed, this could dramatically impact boater safety. For boaters crossing the lake and crossing the Broads, this would be like trying to cross a highway. Likewise, this could change the volume of family boaters using the lake and frequenting the businesses. I have been a realtor in the Lakes region for 8 years, speaking with lakefront owners and boaters. and not once has anyone ever questioned the current lake speed. I am a boater, and I know from experience what it's like years ago being in Maine and boating in an area of high-speed boats. It wasn't fun. And for those who sail at Lake Winnipesaukee, the Broads is the place to be. It's wide open. However, putting high-speed boats and sailboats in the Broads at the same time is a very dangerous mix. Now, I have a question for you folks. Raising your hands. How many have been in a boat going 30 miles an hour? Okay, very good, very good. Well, let me tell you, it's not like driving a car at 30 miles an hour. There's no top generally, and you're right near the water, which would be technically the pavement in the car. It is very fast. 30 is fast. My kids, and they're in their 20s and 30s, they think it's fast when we're out in mud. So just also keep that in mind, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Any questions? I don't see any questions. Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Helve, up next, Nancy Watson.
Thank you. I'm a lifelong boater on Winnipesaukee and strongly oppose House Bill 448. Like thousands of other islanders, my family has to use boating as transportation to and from our island cottage. We use our boats to pick up guests and family, to shop for groceries, to eat out at restaurants, to carry garbage and recyclables, and to do a host of other errands, often through the Broads. What have we learned? What have I learned, along with many others, over the last 14 years about high-speed boating and the 45-30 boating speed limits law? First, the American Red Cross and the U.S. Coast Guard have taught us about boater fatigue from an operator's strained visibility due to sun reflecting on waters, bouncing around on turbulent waves, motor vibration, and noise, adding reaction time and reducing a boat operator's ability to avoid an accident. Boater fatigue can triple the effects of alcohol. The average New England boat operator's time behind the wheel is less than 35 hours per year, so he or she may be rusty. Boats don't have brakes or turn signals, and passengers usually don't wear life jackets. Boat traffic goes in all directions and is unpredictable. As a result, many boaters are unprepared for the unexpected, and poor decisions can quickly lead to tragic boating accidents. Secondly, we have learned from enforcement authorities at lakes around the U.S. where there are boating speed limits that 95% of boaters abide by speed limits just by having the law on the books, which is what we've experienced over the last 14 years. The 45-30 speed limits are self-enforcing. They say that a speed limits-based regulation program is essential to maintaining the recreational values of a lake. As one enforcement person said, speed is an issue. Speed limits improve reaction time, cutting down on accidents and injury. Boats have not changed in 40 years other than to increase power. They lack any safety equipment like that's required in cars, airbags, padded dashes, etc. So boaters have no protection. For every fatality, there are 20 injury accidents, and most are head injuries that can result in drowning. Speed and recklessness are the most important factors. Thirdly, New Hampshire visitor brochures sell the Lakes region with descriptions such as long, blissful, sunny days spent on the water, days when swimming and boat rides are savored and everything moves at a slow summer simmer. Here you can breathe a bit deeper, savor each moment more fully, and focus on the important things in life and relax. The family vacation that calls up those great memories from your childhood. Let's preserve this safe, family-friendly lake enjoyment. Please vote against House Bill 448 and any changes to the reasonable and effective 45-30 law. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Up next, Nancy Watson on deck. Mark Watson. I don't think they're related, are you? Nancy, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time today. My name is Nancy Watson, and I'm from Willisbean Road in Eaton. Well, my 93-year-old father likes to remind me that I'm no spring chicken. And he may be right about that, because this summer will mark my 36th year on Rattlesnake Island, facing the Broads on Lake Winnipesaukee. Like many people are here today, this is also the third time in the last 14 years that I've traveled to Concord to support boat speed limits on the lake. And I'm doing this because I know they work. Before the limits were enacted, the boat traffic, especially in the vicinity of the Broads, was chaotic. On busy weekends, large power boats frequently raced each other or traveled in packs at high speeds, often weaving around other smaller boats and slower boats, going in either direction, as well as crisscrossing the lake. And our camp has, from the dock up to the cottage, about 60 steps, so you have a really good vantage point of looking down on the lake. And in looking down on the lake, it was intimidating just to watch all this, and it was even more intimidating to be down traveling in it. Since the enactment of the boat speed limits, more families now drift, more fishermen fish, and more kayakers and paddleboarders venture out into this part of the lake. The lake is especially, the Broads, is inviting for all to enjoy. And the gentleman who actually testified earlier had a good analogy of having this area be like a park. I mean, you increase the boat speed limits, you're going to drive all the people out of this area. And I don't see where creating a free-for-all drag strip benefits the majority, especially in an area that is the hub of the lake and experiences a high volume of use. Don't burden Marine Patrol with any more responsibility. And individuals who operate these high-performance boats, in the past when I've listened to testimony, justify their desire for this speed by saying they're experienced boat handlers. I don't dispute that, and they probably are, but you know, everyone makes mistakes. We're all human, and please ITL HB 448 and don't give speed the opportunity to create a crisis. And one more thing, my father, he taught me how to drive a car, and he always used to remind me, the faster you go, the faster you gotta think. And I believe that also carries over into boating. And dear old dad was right, I hate to admit. Thank you for your time.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Up next, Mark Watson. On deck, Ken Robbins. Mark?
Good afternoon. I'm going to read a letter from a marina owner on the lake. His name is Bob Conrad. Dear committee members, I am Bob Conrad, owner of Northwater Marine, formerly Thurston's Marina in Weirs Beach. While I became a marina owner in 2021, I had been a property owner on Lake Winnipesaukee since 2000 and a boater on Lake Winnipesaukee since 1995, so I've experienced the lake with and without speed limits. It's clear to me that Lake Winnipesaukee is a better place with speed limits in all areas. I oppose HB 448. As a boater, I do not want to return to the days of being intimidated and endangered by high-speed boats anywhere on the lake. I personally had multiple dangerous encounters with high-speed boats failing to yield the right-of-way, creating anxiety for everyone in my party. As a marina owner on Lake Winnipesaukee, our business depends on families feeling comfortable and safe boating in all areas of the lake. Families, often multi-generational, are attracted to the lake, which drives the local economy through real estate, businesses, on and off the water. Removing the lake speed limit or increasing it is a serious risk to that attraction for families and the local economy. So as a resident, boater, and business owner, I oppose HB 448 and ask you to oppose it as well. Best regards, Bob Conrad. And I also personally, I have a cottage on the lake for over 35 years, and I've seen the lake before and after speed limits, and it is really impressive what the speed limits have done to the safety on the lake. Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Up next, Mr. Robbins. On deck, Ms. Bozzelli.
Thank you very much for your time. Good afternoon. My name is Ken Robbins. I'm here both on behalf of Camp Cabian in Alton Bay, which is a century-old summer camp where I am the executive director, but also on behalf of the New Hampshire Camp Directors Association, which represents the approximately 180 residential and day youth recreation camps in the state. Many of those are on Lake Winnipesaukee. Most of my points have been better articulated by those who have come before me in opposition to HB 448. I'll simply re-emphasize that our opposition stems from concern for how increased speed coupled with increased traffic puts children and the staff that are in our care at increased risk. And we have a duty to maximize the safety of all who share the lake. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Don't see any. Thank you for your testimony. Up
Good
next.
afternoon. Oh, I'm sorry. Good afternoon, and I just wanted to thank the committee because you've all been extremely attentive for a very long period of time. I think you realize the passion behind many of us here regarding the safety of Lake Winnipesaukee. I've lived on the lake on a small island adjacent to the Broads for 41 years and have seen it all, mostly the safe and a lot of unsafe. I'm very concerned about increase in speed limit. We have youngsters in sailing programs who sail across the Broads, and to think about not just one, but maybe two boats traveling at 65 miles per hour. And this is approximately 150 feet here. So you could have one there, and you could have one there running side by side at 65 miles per hour. And then maybe you have 40 children out in small sailboats. How is that? That's just not going to work. I think one of the proponents of the new law talked about minority versus majority. Yes, it is a minority versus a majority. It's just inverse to his proposal. Obviously, to me and to many others, the majority is we do not want to see this bill passed. The minority are those who own these extremely high-speed boats and have one intent, which is just to go fast. I own a power boat. I go maybe 30 miles an hour, maybe 32. I can take my children water skiing. We can go for a sunset cruise. We can go tubing. We can go for ice cream. How fast do you really need to go? So thank you for listening, and thank you for opposing this bill.
Thank you for your testimony. I have 2 cards left. Up next, Ms. Hickson. And the last card, Mr. Ehrenberg. Ms. Hickson, thank you.
Hello, my name is Ananya Hickson. I'm from Wolfboro. Prior to the passage of the 45-mile-per-hour speed limit, Winnipesaukee, as you've heard, has suffered from being considered the cowboy Wild West destination. Several fatal and high-profile accidents involving high-powered speedboats had contributed to this reputation. And this is why over 300 businesses signed on to supporting the speed limit law. Speed limits on the lake have made a remarkable difference on the improved atmosphere of tranquility and safety for all who recreate there. I take issue with what some have said about these speedboat drivers being the safest and most responsible boaters. One only has to remember the fatal Hartman Littlefield accident, the Erica Blizzard accident, the 2020 accident where a kayaker was seriously injured, or the swimmer hit by the speedboat at 65 miles per hour in 2015. And you will understand that this is not necessarily true, that these drivers are the safest and most responsible. A recent study conducted by Dartmouth College and commissioned by the Lake Winnipesaukee Association showed that the lake generates over $17 billion for the region and the state. Tourists, anglers, primary and second homeowners are attracted to the lake for its special, peaceful beauty and family recreation. They feel safer boating, as do we with the current speed limits. Why abolish the speed limits for a select few at the expense of the majority? Marginalizing the majority of family boaters on the lake is not good for our local economy. 6 marinas and boat dealers opposing HB 448 can attest to this. Our dollars to our state coffers have been, our economy thrives on tourism, and which contributes millions of dollars to our state coffers. It is in part why New Hampshire needs no sales tax. I urge you to vote inexpedient to legislate on this reckless and dangerous bill. And just a more personal note, I don't want my children and my grandchildren to be exposed to these dangers. And without a speed limit, I will move to a different lake and have my friends and family come elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. My last pink card, Mr. Ehrenberg.
Good afternoon. Kurt Ehrenberg. I'm speaking for myself. My regular job here is a state director for the Humane Society of the United States. But I grew up going to summer camp on Lake Winnipesaukee, Ken's camp. Hi, Ken. I just want to say, as someone who grew to love this state as a child through the natural beauty on Lake Winnipesaukee, this is a terrible idea. So please vote this bill ITL. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any more pink cards. Is there anyone present that hasn't filled out a pink card that wishes to speak? I'll ask one more time. Anybody present that wishes to speak that hasn't filled out a pink card? Seeing none and no one approaching the mics, I'm going to declare this hearing closed. I'm going to give the members of our committee a few minutes if you wish to review and look at all the written testimony you have. My clock says it's 2:40. I'll bring us back to take an exec session at around 2:44, and if you need more time at that time, you can tell me. But take a 4-minute break, look at all the written materials, and we'll be back at 2:44 for execing. Thank you. Can I ask the committee members to take their seat so I can reconvene the exec session? So it's 2:47. Members have had a chance to read the written testimony and to reflect upon the bill HB 448. I'm going to call the executive session on HB 448 to order. I believe Representative Ryan, you have a motion you'd like to make?
Thank you. Yes, sir, I do. I make a motion to ITL this bill.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Seconded by Representative Vale. Representative Ryan, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, please. Bill 448 would raise the daytime speed limit from 45 miles an hour to 65 on Lake Winnipesaukee in an area specifically designated as the Broads and loosely defined in the bill by some charted navigational references. A similar version failed in a prior session with little support. The committee received hundreds of emails in opposition and direct testimony from Marine Patrol, Coast Guard captains, and dozens of lake residents, property owners, summer camps, marinas, lake associations, and interested parties in all aspects of this bill. The largest and fastest boats at the high speeds are better suited for open waters of the ocean. No marinas or watercraft merchants spoke or otherwise testified in favor of this legislation. After thorough examination of the safety, recreational, environmental, and individual freedoms aspects on both sides, and all of your testimony, heartfelt thank you for your time for coming today. We unanimously felt the current regulations are sufficient and allow respectful, safe, and peaceful enjoyment of the lake by all and protect the users of this important natural resource and the citizens who enjoy the lake.
Thank you. Representative Vale, do you wish to speak to your second?
No.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My contribution and testimony just is that we heard overwhelming testimony that this would not be felt to be safe by people who have been longstanding, people living on the lake, businesses operating, all of the things that we find special about New Hampshire, where a lot of children come from other states to go to camp. And we really need to think about the will of just a few people and what can happen when you have such a large lake and a diversified place where everyone can recreate. So, and then one more thing is, I'm a fan of the loons, and I don't like watching the loon cam and seeing the nest swamped after weeks and weeks of watching these creatures do their darndest to try to survive in 2023. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Anyone else wish to speak on the motion to ITL? Representative Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Many people spoke about this being a selective bill and not supporting the majority. I have to tell you, I got 701 emails against this. I might have miscounted. There were either 1 or 2 in favor. So in supporting my constituents, I have to vote ITL.
Thank you, Representative. Anyone else wish to speak on the motion of ITL? Representative Rung.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I do want to thank every member of the public that came out today to speak on this bill and all those that sent very concise and personalized emails. It makes a huge difference than getting a form letter email about a certain position. So I do want to thank you for that. And I do want to thank our committee leadership for agreeing to exec this bill directly after the public hearing so it can be disposed of quickly and people can get back to their their calm routine. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Anyone else wishing to speak on the motion to ITL? Seeing no one's hands raised, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll. Madam Clerk.
Yes.
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 Julia, if you can hold on 1 second, I think we're going to turn your mic on.
Thank you. Representative Wolf?
Yes.
Representative McHugh?
Yes.
Representative Donnelly?
Yes.
Representative Dunn?
Yes.
Representative Vale?
Yes.
Representative Rung?
Yes.
Representative Kelly? Oh, he's not here?
Must be absent.
Okay. Representative Simpson?
Yes.
Representative Baldwin?
Yes.
Representative Darby?
Yes.
Representative Hoyt?
Yes.
Representative Lamontagne?
Yes.
Representative Lovett?
Yes.
Representative Ryan?
Yes, please.
And Representative Harp.
Yes, so that's 20 for ITL, 0 against.
18.
Or 18. 18. Do we have consent? Would we put that on consent? Everyone says yes, so we'll put the ITL on the consent agenda. I, again, like my fellow representatives, thank all of you for coming here today and having the opportunity to speak to us. We really appreciate hearing from you in person. That concludes our exec session, and I'll declare this session closed. Thank you.